Before we get to today's podcast with Jason Leisure and Joe Schad, we're excited to tell you about one of our great partners here at the 5 Reasons Sports Network, which, like us, is pure South Florida, and that is Doral Toyota, where you can find all your favorite Toyota models, whether you're looking for a new, used, or certified pre-owned vehicle. Doral Toyota is located at 9775 Northwest 12th Street, just a few blocks from the International and Dolphin Malls. Experience the Doral difference, which means 4 years complimentary maintenance and roadside assistance on all new vehicles. In-house financing is available for credit-related issues. Also, if you mention 5 Reasons when you call 305-680-1129, that's 305-680-1129, or come in, you will work with a dedicated manager, not a salesman. Unlike other dealers, Doral Toyota prides itself on an honest and transparent buying process. That's Doral Toyota, DoralToyota.com, or stop in at 9775 Northwest 12th Street. Vamos! Let's go. And now, on to Joe Schad and Jason Leisure.
Welcome into the latest episode of the 5 Reasons Podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick here, as always, with Chris Whittingham. Now that you have found us, make sure that you hit the follow or subscribe button, depending on what platform that you use. That way you'll get all of the old episodes as well as all of the new episodes as soon as they post. Also, check out all of the other podcasts in our network. We're now up to 12 podcasts in the network. That doesn't even include our patron feed, where you can find bonus content from our pod, all the other pods, and also from local creators. We're putting commentaries on there. We call them patron shots, little 5-minute commentaries. Definitely check those out. We're trying to find talent in the Miami area. And for our talent search today, we have reached out to the Palm Beach Post. We're doing our second Dolphins preview. We did one with the Sun Sentinel guys, Omar Kelly and Chris Perkins, and we did that one already. You can find that on our feed. And I'm just going to introduce you guys this way, Joe Schad and Jason Leisure. When I asked them why they should listen to or read the Sun Sentinel's coverage, they said because they're the guys who keep it fun and keep it real. So if I was to ask you, what is the Palm Beach Post's Dolphins coverage about, what would be your slogan for it?
I don't care. You go ahead and take this one, Schad. I don't care.
I don't know. I like to say all in, which is, all in on Dolphins. There's this big dispute about whether Auburn stole all in slogan from like Alabama or something.
Right.
Everyone's all in. It was like a big college sports thing. And we try to basically do more blogs than anyone. That's our thing. So you might go to the Palm Beach Post Dolphins website and see like 17 posts in one day.
Yeah.
We're proud of that.
More and better.
More and better. I like that. And Hal Habib also on Dolphins coverage.
Ethan, what's all this stuff you're always tweeting about how you guys are like the biggest media outlet in South Florida now?
Well, no, we're not.
We're not bigger than the Palm Beach Post now?
No, we're not bigger, but our Twitter account is actually our Twitter account
has, who a favor?
No, well, you are, although it's changed a little over the last 2 months. I mean, we were desperate for you 2 months ago. This time we actually had to talk about it a little bit.
Okay. I was wondering, are you guys lucky to have us? Are you guys lucky to have us, or like we lucky to be on 5 Reasons Why, or what's going on?
No, we're lucky to have Schad, but I mean, Shad's the one with 600,000 Twitter followers. But with you, I mean, your first episode actually was well received. We were surprised, and so we basically said, why not do it again? And you kind of come along for the ride with Joe, so we thought that was the right direction to go. And I do have some questions for you, though, Jason. I'll get to a couple for Joe from our Twitter followers. Are you over the Jupiter Juggernaut thing? Because that had not happened, I think, when we interviewed you the last time.
I'll never really be over it, man. It's the Dolphins really let one get away. We actually, we got a chance to ask Adam Gates about that at the owners' meetings back in March. And my question to him was this: you guys really screwed up by letting Parkey go.
There's not really a question mark at the end of that.
Yeah, that was
it. And what was his response?
He just kind of looked at me, but he knows I'm right.
In all seriousness, how have the kickers actually got on?
Oh, I don't care. What difference does it make?
I talked to Jason Sanders today.
Give him some kicker news, Schad. Give him some kicker news.
I asked the youngster from New Mexico, I said, when Tannehill throws an interception, he always tells me, don't worry about it. I'm just working on things. I said, is it kind of like that with kickers? And he goes, no, I need to make more. So
the other guy, Greg Joseph, is actually from Palm Beach County. He's originally from South Africa, but he played high school ball in Delray Beach, and he hit a 61-yarder today. But number one, I'm hesitant now. I'm jaded. I'm not about to fall in love with another kicker. And two, I don't have a good nickname for him yet. So,
all right, well, we'll throw that out here on at 5 Reasons Sports, which, like you mentioned, has more Twitter followers than the PB Post Sports account. So that's
5 Reasons or 5 Reasons Why?
No, it's at 5 Reasons Sports. So we're gonna throw that out there. We need a nickname for this. What's his name? Greg Joseph, right? That's his name. The new kicker.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna give.
He might not even be the new kicker, though. It might be the other guy.
That's true. Well, for one of them.
Send your suggestions to 5 Reasons Why, the biggest media outlet in Miami.
I think at the end of this, I'm going to go post the Palm Beach Post blog, 5 Reasons Why I'll Never Be on Ethan's podcast again.
I think you used 5 Reasons in a blog. I saw that recently.
It's really not all that creative. Ethan.
No.
It's been before.
Yeah.
You definitely don't have proprietary rights.
It's Chris anyway.
It's not unique and brilliant like All In.
No, that's true. Right. That all in, which the Cavaliers used after LeBron left in 2010, actually. So I don't even know that it's just Auburn. I remember them using that.
Schad thought of it before that, though.
That's
Sometimes
right.
I like to make Barry Jackson flinch by tweeting things like Buzz. He looks at me across the room like, you know that Buzz is me.
He has a corner on Buzz.
So let's get to the Dolphins conversation here. And what we're going to do is the same thing we did with the Sentinel guys, what we're going to do with the Herald guys, is we're dividing this into 3 parts. And we've got kind of one big picture topic, and then we're going to hit a couple of position groups. So here's the big picture topic for you guys. And Jason, you can jump in here first, and then we'll get to Joe. But
do you want me to answer it like I'm reporting from the front lines, like with all the wind and the airplanes flying?
100%.
Absolutely.
You guys ask me who's the punt returner, and I'm like, Ethan, Chris, I'm out here. There's a lot going on. It looks like it'll be Danny Amendola in tight situations, and possibly Jakeem Grant when there's more room to run.
Reporting live. This is Jason Leisure.
I'll stay out here as long as I can, but the conditions are worsening.
You sound like Will Manso during a hurricane. All right, so all right.
I am. I'm holding onto a tree right now, and I'm parallel to the ground.
I'm never getting through this one today. All
it's
right,
getting wild out here. The conditions are worsening, and I think they'll throw a lot of bubble screens to Albert Wilson.
All right, I'm going to try again. Here's the big picture topic for you guys, and we've actually talked about this with some others on our show, but not specifically with Dolphins reporters, is we're trying to figure out who the Dolphins' next stars are going to be. Because when you look at the NFL Network list this year, there was one guy on it, I think he was in the 70s on their top 100 list, and he's 36 years old, Cameron Wake. So if I was to ask both of you guys, I'll start here with Jason from the front lines. If I was to ask both of you guys, give me 3 or 4 guys on this roster who you think over the next 2 years can be on that top 100 list for NFL Network, can be Pro Bowl or even All-Pro type players.
Well, I think one of them would be Kenyon Drake, but Kenyon Drake is 24, 25 years old. He's already kind of got a short window now. He's got about 5 years where if he breaks out and is a Pro Bowl type player, it'll probably be for about 5 or 6 years, and then that'll be the end of it. Other than that, it's pretty hard to predict.
Yeah, I agree that Kenyon Drake is the player most likely to emerge as a star this year. There's been so much talk about whether or not Frank Gore is actually going to be a touchdown vulture and whether or not he's going to actually get more carries than people expect. But if Drake is not a star by the end of the year, then that really damages the Dolphins' chances to be competitive. I mean, this is a big part of the problem. We were at a scrimmage the other day. Nobody came. Part of the problem is a lack of star power. To have the teams that have the most interest in the NFL, the teams that have star power at quarterback, wide receiver, and defensive end. Maybe Charles Harris can be a star. Wouldn't put my money on it. Maybe Xavier Howard and Minkah Fitzpatrick can be a star. Not sure that those guys will ever rise to the level of being a top 100 player. We thought Laramie Tunsil would. Hasn't happened. Has not been good in camp. He's not been very good in camp. I mean, he's been fine, but the Dolphins' recent draft choices have not broken out as stars. And part of the reason that this training camp has been boring is because there is no Baker Mayfield here. there is no Josh Allen here. There isn't even a Josh Rosen here. And so people are just like, yeah, whatever.
This is the problem we ran into going into the last game last year when they went into that season finale, Schad, with nothing to play for. And you would have been kind of interested if they had some draft pick quarterback on the bench that was going to play instead of Smoking Jay, or if they had some young guys that you just hadn't gotten a chance to see that you thought might be good. And they didn't really have that. And now, I mean, what you alluded to, when you go to that scrimmage the other day and there's nobody there, I can't blame them. And I mean, if you're a Dolphins fan right now, like, which jersey are you going to go buy? You're going to probably go buy a Jason Taylor 99 jersey.
Yeah, and that's really been the case for a while now. And that's kind of one of the other things that I was kind of making the argument for on draft night when it seemed like Josh Rosen might fall to them was, well, even if you don't necessarily play him or he never ends up playing, at the very least you're giving your fan base something, right? You're giving them something to look forward to or something that maybe could produce an outcome in the future. I would say the one player, based off of what I've read from you guys and from other people at training camp, is Xavier Howard becoming a lockdown corner. We saw it at times last year, but I don't feel like you're necessarily confident that he can kick on and be that guy for 16 games. He was incredible against New England and against Denver, but you need him to be that for every game of the season. And it seems like at the start of training camp, he's gotten off to a good he got off to a bad start in terms of by day, but in terms of the overall start to the season, he's gotten off to a good start. But I feel like he also represents someone who could become a better corner in this league if he continues on his current trajectory.
But that's not an exciting position. I mean, we're talking about a running back, which is being phased out of the game practically, and a cornerback, which, you know, when they're playing their best, you don't even notice them because they're not throwing that way. So it's two positions where you got some young talent, but they're not real exciting, compelling positions for the most part.
Yeah, Xavier Howard has been solid, and the Dolphins will take solid cornerback play over somewhat of what they've gotten in recent years. Howard is physical. He's a good run stuffer. He's, tough, but I still think that he's vulnerable to speedsters. And if they're going to have him shadow the opposing team's top receivers, they might hope that it's not a burner, because you could still see Xavier Howard get run by.
Guys, a couple of guys on the offense, though, I want to mention, because as you said, if you're going to be a star, typically it's got to be a guy who touches the ball, right? Like, I mean, you see guys on defense break out, but it's either the quarterback or it's somebody who's making plays and scoring touchdowns. So there are two guys on the offense I wanted to ask you about. The first one I think there's high hopes for, and the other has been a huge disappointment. Do you think – let's start with the disappointment, because that's what we do on this show a lot. Devontae Parker, do you guys hold out any hope that he can become what they thought they were drafting a couple of years ago?
Not
I don't
really.
think it's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jay.
No, that was my answer. Not really. Go ahead, Schad.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're on the same page on this. I mean, I think Danny Amendola and Kenny Stills are each more likely to have more catches than Devontae Parker. You know, he's essentially in his contract year, Parker is, even though they have the right to his fifth-year option. They don't have to pick it up if they don't want. And, I mean, he looks the part. I mean, he looks like Terrell Owens. I mean, he's got his size. He's got his athleticism. He's got his hands. There's no reason he shouldn't be a dominant player. If Devontae Parker never becomes a Devontae Parker, if Devontae Parker never becomes a dominant player, there's only one person to blame, and that's Devontae Parker. He would have to look himself in the mirror and figure out why it is he never had that hunger, that desire, that competitiveness, that will to fight for the football, to demand the football, to be. And maybe that's just not what he was destined to be.
Other than no, which is your answer there. I mean, you've dealt with him now up close in the locker room, talking to him. I mean, what is missing in your view? Because the most fight that I've seen from him, honestly, guys, was when we had Chris Chambers on our podcast, and then Chris basically sent a text ranking the receivers in training camp, and he had Devontae Parker third, which I think is fair based on what's ended up happening. And Devontae reacted on Twitter within about 3 minutes and got upset about that. Like, he gets upset about something like that, but doesn't seem to be motivated enough to put it together. So your interactions with him, like, what is he like for people who don't know him?
Well, he's extremely quiet. He doesn't say much at all. When we talk to him, kind of mumbles and everything. But then you hear that there's a different guy when he's on the practice field, that he's a little bit of a talker. He's not afraid to get in the face with some cornerbacks and stuff like that. Sorry, there's a giant tractor passing by me right now. But I think his biggest problem, to your original question, is his health. He hasn't been healthy pretty much since the day he got here. And when he hasn't been healthy, I think he's kind of gone in the tank at that point. He starts thinking he can't perform the way he wants to, and you start losing him. Where even when he's on the field, you're not getting a very good player. And you saw at the end of last season, one of the big problems was he wasn't aggressive enough, and he could have fought off some interceptions that he didn't.
All right, so let's get to another guy here because I think there's a little bit more hope here, and then we'll get into the receivers at large. Mike Gesicki, I know that the concern with him is whether he can block well enough to be part of a lot of different formations, but from what you've seen here over the first week, what is his potential in the passing game for this team? Not just going forward, but this season for Ryan Tannehill.
The best thing that Mike Gesicki has going for him is that he's not Julius Thomas or Jordan Cameron. I mean, the tight end position has been an absolute bust under Adam Gase. Tried to salvage something out of a washed Thomas, and Jordan Cameron was, concussed and just couldn't play. He completely lost his confidence, dropped the ball all over the place. So, tight end really should be a versatile, explosive weapon in the red zone on third down in this Adam Gase offense. Gesicki is going to make some highlight reel plays. He's good with the one-handed catches. He has really good body control. He has good hands. The problem is going to be, does Adam Gase and Ryan Tannehill trust Mike Gesicki not to get Ryan Tannehill killed in the first 3 weeks of the season or the first 6 weeks of the season? At some point, Gesicki is going to start because he's too talented a receiver not to be on the field, but especially early in the season, I think it's going to take some time. I predict that fans are going to get frustrated because you're going to see a lot of Marquise Gray and AJ Derby, and people are going to want to know, well, where is Mike Gesicki? In the same way Dolphin fans once appropriately called for Kenyon Drake. Why was Drake not on the field? Damian Williams is averaging 2 yards a carry, and I know Leisure is a big Damian Williams guy, but Drake needed to be on the field more. I was right about that one, Leisure, wasn't I?
Yes. You know what's interesting? If you watch the NFL over the last few years, you've seen this crazy emerging trend of tight ends being part of the passing game. And if you haven't noticed that, then you might be working for the Dolphins front office, because the two positions that have become so important are these monster pass catching tight ends and the linebackers that can contain them. And the Dolphins have just ignored both of those positions. Mike Gesicki is the highest drafted tight end they've had in like 40 years. Julius Thomas had been their best. And Joe was laughing about Julius Thomas, coming here with broken legs practically. And he's the best tight end they've had since Charles Clay, because he got about 400 yards. But my favorite Julius Thomas thing has to be that one time Julius Thomas walked through the showers fully clothed with his luggage to avoid having to talk to Joe.
That's completely true.
That's how lovable Schad is.
That's great. Well,
Wait,
before
no. What happened? Why didn't he want to talk to you?
No. There was no personal conflict. It was I had actually stated before the season.
There was no personal conflict, guys, except for the fact that Schad hated him.
No, it was more that he knew he stunk. That was it. It's like, how many times can you say, "Yeah, I stink"? How many different ways?
It does get redundant after a while.
Yeah,
they didn't say that. They never said that he was bad. And at this point last year, in the calendar year 2017, the Dolphins still thought he was good. The Dolphins thought he was good.
We didn't. We all knew he sucked. We all knew it.
The Dolphins thought he
How
was
could
good
they not
into
know?
September.
He was so bad.
And they would come in there and they would, after another game where Julius Thomas had 2 catches for 17 yards, and they would lament that, it just weren't getting the coverages, which is what you hear all the great tight ends say. Gronkowski will just go quiet all of a sudden because they're just not getting the right coverages. They're just not getting the right matchups.
Sorry, I'm still hung up on Julius Thomas. He was so bad in the spring that I proclaimed I would never do an interview with him. And Leisure, you laugh about the suitcase in the shower. That is true. I might have interviewed him if not for the suitcase in the shower. But I did never ask him a football question the whole year. Very proud of that.
Maybe
you are very proud to have not done your job for the entire year.
Right.
But guys, this has been a consistent pattern with the Dolphins. So many regimes in so many years where they would just insist that someone was good. Like, Joe, were you still around for the Parcells time, or had Jeff taken over by then?
2004, so I missed Parcells.
Yeah, you missed Parcells. All right, so the first year of Parcells, Ernest Wilford, man, they were trying to talk us into Ernest Wilford the whole time. Like, he done all this great work at Jacksonville. He was really, he was good during all the sessions that we didn't see. I mean, they always do that once the season.
Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one.
That's a big one. That group would even tell the DBs to tell us that Ernest Wilford was doing well. And then you would talk to those DBs on the side. They'd be like, "Yeah, he sucks. But
Ethan, they've been doing it just the last few years here. They brought in Mario Williams. They brought in Julius Thomas. They brought in Lawrence Timmons, and they're doing it to you again right now. They're bringing in Frank Gore and Danny Amendola, and they say they look great now, and you kind of think they look good. And those guys are coming off a little better season than Julius Thomas was coming off, granted. But how do you know that when you get into the games and those guys start getting banged around, that they're going to hold up the guys that are in their mid-30s that the other teams don't want? Like, it's not a good sign when New England, which values good players, doesn't want Danny Amendola anymore. Sometimes one man's trash is another man's trash.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with Fales, because Gase is adamant that Fales is pretty good. If this guy actually has to play, I think the Dolphins are in deep.
Or Osweiler. Neither one of them is good.
The one that sticks out to me is, like, we all know that the offensive line was horrific. We all knew that Dallas Thomas was an incompetent NFL player, and they insisted on throwing him out every Sunday at left guard, and we're all looking like there is no difference between what you're seeing and what we're seeing. Yeah, I don't know nearly as much about football as you, but why do you keep throwing him out there? He was terrible, and then one day they just decided to cut everyone who they invested in, and it's like, clearly we were right about that. And for some reason, they insisted on trying to. No. Well, you don't understand offensive line play. Dallas Thomas is actually good, and it's just like, in what universe? And it happens all the time.
2 years ago, you don't understand.
It's another
We're
example.
Bringing back Jermon Bushrod, and Jermon Bushrod is one of the best people I have. And Leisure laughs at me because I always say,
"Yep, here it comes.
Oh, you always preface
Here it comes. This is the Schad move."
Jermon
I gotta
Bushrod.
say, Jermon Bushrod is a wonderful human being.
He is.
He is a living saint. If Schad ever says that about you, duck for the second half of that sentence.
I would let him babysit my kids, but I would not want him playing guard on my offensive line. Okay. And how did we see it? Okay. I'm no coach, but when I turn on the film and I see the guy getting knocked backwards onto his butt, that's not good.
If you're a follower of the 5 Reasons Sports Twitter account, you will find a lot of information there about Texas Roadhouse. They're one of our great sponsors here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, especially the location in Miramar Pines, right off of I-75, convenient to everything. We've been running some contests, $30 gift certificates. We'll also be hosting our first watch party for the Dolphins-Panthers road preseason game, August 17th. In Carolina. We'll all be at that Texas Roadhouse. Hosts from all over the network also have some food and drink specials and some 5 Reasons paraphernalia for you. If you can't get in there that day, we hope you can. Friday, the 17th of August. Be sure to check out Kids Night every Tuesday night. I am there with my daughter because she wants a good meal there, and I want to pay only $1.99 with the purchase of an adult meal. They've got all kinds of cool things for the kids there, including someone who makes balloons for them. They have arts and crafts. Sometimes they even have a magician. So go check out Texas Roadhouse. Again, that's in Miramar, right off of I-75 on Miramar Parkway. And now back to Joe and Jason. Let's get to the receivers more specifically. I know we touched on Devontae. You guys mentioned Amendola. When we had Chris Chambers on with us, he was pushing Kenny Stills. He thinks Kenny Stills can be a legitimate number 1 receiver, that he can do everything. How do you guys see him? He's been very productive when he's gotten opportunity, but he hasn't really been in that role. How are they going to use him? And is he a guy who could be a Pro Bowler potentially if he gets enough opportunity?
Come on. Kenny Stills a Pro Bowler. Me and Leisure have different opinions. Leisure is very close to Kenny Stills. They spend a lot of time together in the locker room. They're very good friends. Jason Leisure is very fascinated by all that Kenny Stills does off the field. I think he's
Jason
a good player.
Leisure is very pro freedom of speech and social equality, things like that.
That's the thing with Kenny Stills. All these stories about kneeling, not kneeling. Catch the football. I don't know. He's a good player. I think he has a nice yards catch. I think he's a good leader in the wide receivers room. Number 1 receiver on a good NFL team? Never. No. Leisure, your response?
Should I answer this one like I'm reporting live from the field with all his wins?
Yes.
Joe, Kenny Stills is a very good receiver. He's probably a number 2 on a very good team. Unfortunately, I kind of agree with you. Other than that, I think he is a model NFL player.
So there actually isn't that much discord between you guys on this issue.
Stills can play in the slot, which is interesting, because Amendola is going to be the number one slot receiver. He's definitely going to lead the team in catches. But the Albert Wilson fellow that they brought in from Kansas City, Gase is adamant that he's not a slot. So if something were to happen to Amendola, you'd actually see Stills in the slot. And I think either way, you'll see Stills in the slot. So a lot of weapons for Gase to utilize. The pressure is on him to figure out how to game come up with a creative, diverse, complex, innovative plan that will actually cause some confusion. Because for the last 2 years, all we've seen is the Dolphins offense confusing themselves with offside penalties and false starts. What a disaster. That has been the most disappointing thing.
And then Gase complaining about it. Gase comes in every day like, I just can't believe these guys. He doesn't say it like that. But, it's interesting when, Joe, you mentioned that this year is it's all on Adam Gase. It really is. It's his third year. And from their perspective, no matter what it looks like to anyone else, this isn't the roster of a team that's tanking. It kind of looks like that to me, but they don't think that. They think Adam Gase talks about this like it's the roster of his dreams. Like he's been given, finally, he's got it exactly the way he imagined it when he took this job in January 2016. So if this hand-picked roster of good guys and hard workers can't get it done, then it's really going to be on him.
I kind of like the look of this receivers group just because I don't think now, obviously, you want to have a Julio Jones. You want to have an Antonio Brown as now number one, but I don't think necessarily not knowing who the number one receiver is going to be in a given game is that big of a deal. I don't think most NFL teams operate that way, or at least the successful ones, where clearly that guy's getting all the targets. And that's the way that they operated with Jarvis Landry, and I'm not sure necessarily that it was to the benefit of the passing game. I do actually think that there is a world that a team can operate in where you can just sort of look at a play and go, all right, who's open on that play, and throw it to that guy, and that guy's good. Like, I think the Dolphins know that they have 4 good receivers, and so I do think that does at the very least give this offense a different dynamic where who do you game plan for in a given week? They're all at least decent to good players.
You don't need great receivers to win playoff games in the NFL. You don't. You really don't. And Kenny Stills plus Devontae Parker had about 50% more yards with about the same amount of catches as Jarvis Landry did last season. So I agree that this receiver core is good enough in the same way I think Ryan Tannehill is good enough, in the same way I think the offensive line is good enough. I think they're good enough. They're good enough. There's no excuse for this offense not to be in the top half of the league. And if it isn't, it's Adam Gase's fault.
What do you think of the way that they used Jakeem Grant last year? Because I feel like it took them like 12 weeks to determine that they had a guy who could actually beat a DB one-on-one, and maybe they should actually utilize him a little bit. I know quarterback played into that some, but what is his role going to be? Where are they going to use him? Is it all going to be on the outside? Because other than the return game, where obviously he's going to be involved there, I feel like there should be more of a role for him in the offense.
I feel like he's just smaller Gesicki, isn't he? Like he's a foot shorter and he's 100 pounds lighter, but you can't trust him to block. And so it's very hard to keep him in the game when he can't do everything that a receiver has to do.
They just went out and got a more sophisticated, more expensive version of Jakeem Grant by signing Albert Wilson. So Jakeem Grant basically starts at zero again. He's going to have a hard time getting on the field in the offense.
He drops the ball every now and then. He'll make some exciting plays every now and then. It's a lot of mouths to feed, and Jakeem Grant's going to have a hard time getting fed.
Looking at this group, and I know Chris likes the group because they're more multiple. Joe, you talk about the numbers here, which I agree with. I mean, they are what they are. That Landry just didn't produce a lot per catch, and I mean, historically low actually for that number of catches, and so they got more production from other guys. But where are the places that they're going to miss Jarvis? Because let's just get beyond the money, which I don't think they should have paid him that much money. I was pretty clear on that. Whittingham and I did episodes about that. I think it was fine for them to walk away from him. But there are clearly places that they're going to miss what he provided. So for you guys, what would those be?
On-field fire. There were certainly people in this building here in Davie, Florida, who think that Jarvis Landry's off-field fire was misdirected and somewhat poisoned the waters among his teammates. That's why he's gone. I don't think they thought that in the end he was a good dude who could be trusted. But he brought emotion, passion. He fought for the extra yards. which of these guys is most likely to, quote, turn into a running back after catching the ball? Amendola is kind of a catch and fall guy. Stills is a deep guy. Parker is a jump and usually not get it guy. So I would argue that Jakeem Grant or Albert Wilson are actually the two guys who are most like Jarvis Landry. But what's ironic is that Adam Gase doesn't want to use either one of those guys in the middle of the field. He's used them as outside receivers. So it's kind of a different dynamic. You know, it'll be interesting to see how this affects Ryan Tannehill losing his security blanket.
Slot receiver is another position like quarterback where there's not a very good plan B. If plan A doesn't work out, they don't really have another slot receiver. Not someone that's going to do that job the way Landry did or the way Danny Amendola has done it in the past. So if Amendola goes down, you've got Albert Wilson, who Gase does not think is a slot receiver, or you've got Kenny Stills, who is not exactly that kind of stick your face in it receiver like Amendola, who, you know, doesn't blink about going over the middle and getting his head knocked off. I mean, they really don't have a good plan B at that spot.
And Isaiah Ford, who actually I think is going to make the team. He's the come-from-nowhere guy of the camp. He's the one guy who's actually kind of stepped forward. It's funny. The dude you mentioned before, Ethan, I think he was a Virginia Tech receiver, right? Ernest Wilford?
Yes.
Isaiah Ford, same thing. It's kind of similarly built. Ford's thing is going to be, can he stay healthy? But, I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches at the receiver position. They really have enough talent. They really do.
I don't agree.
Oh, okay. Why don't you agree, Jason?
An embarrassment of riches, and we're talking about how they don't have a Pro Bowl guy. They don't have a 1,000-yard receiver down there. I just don't see it that way.
I think they have an embarrassment of NFL caliber players, right? Like they have players that are credible receivers that you
They've got a bunch of stuff, but nobody else wants it.
They're the Heat, right? Well, the reality is we've talked about this. They're the Heat right now. I mean, they're in the same position and I think on a lot of their other positions in the roster that the Heat are, where the Heat have a lot of B- to B+ players. And what the Heat have found this offseason is when you overpay those guys, you've got too many of them, you can't offload them. And then you have a glut. I feel a little bit like that's what we're looking at with the Dolphins, where I like the fact that they can be more multiple. I like the fact they've got a lot of different guys that can do different jobs, and they've got some protection there if guys get hurt. But you're right. If you guys don't believe that Stills is a guy who is enough of a number one to attract attention for the other guys, then it is going to be hard for them to put up big numbers. So that's where
at the end of the season, we will be grading the Miami Dolphins wide receiver core on one thing and one thing only. Is Devontae Parker still a bust and a stiff, or does he actually emerge into this superstar unicorn that he was supposed to be?
Devontae Parker raises this storyline where you have to ask yourself, when was their last good first-round pick? When was their last first-round pick that was what it's supposed to be when you're drafting that high? I mean, you have to go all the way back to – you got to go back to Mike Pouncey. That's a long time ago.
I mean, you don't think Ryan Tannehill?
Ryan Tannehill's been league average. You're not looking for league average when you draft eighth overall.
I mean, okay, understanding that you want franchise, you want Aaron Rodgers, but there are a lot of eighth overall picks that end up being Christian Ponder. And like,
well, those are bad picks too, Chris.
Understood, but I don't think I don't think Ryan Tannehill is a bad pick. I think you got an NFL level starter out of a first round pick at quarterback, and given the standard of a lot of first round pick quarterbacks, you cannot say that he was a bad pick.
You got a guy that at his position is just like all their other first round picks. He's just okay. You're looking for more than that in the first round. Go ahead, Joe.
I wrote 5 reasons why. Checks in the mail.
Thank you.
5 reasons why Ryan Tannehill could still be elite. And obviously I was, cited for clickbait, which, maybe it was a little, and, told that was an absolute joke. But no, I mean, I try not to write things I don't believe. I mean, at least I believe it.
Did you write the next day 5 reasons why he'll be terrible?
I did not.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
But that would definitely be a clickbait situation. I'm a Ryan Tannehill apologist. I think that we too easily forget just how good he was at the end of the 2016 season. He was playing at a Pro Bowl level.
We'll be back to our episode with the Palm Beach Post guys here in a second, but want to introduce you to another of the great sponsors on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is spacewolf.com. That's 2 F's at the end, SPACEWOLFF. Com. We use Space Wolf for a lot of our sponsorships. It's a really easy site. You go on there, you pick what you want to advertise on. They have a section just for podcasts. All of the 5 Reasons Sports podcasts are on there, and you can advertise virtually anything you want. Also, if you want to put something on something that you have, you can put your space on there. We do that with our podcast, and then people can find you. You get paid quickly. Everything goes to your bank account. No complications. It is a great place to go. So go to spacewolf.com. Again, that's SPACEWOLFF.com. And now back to the podcast. Let's go to the DBs now on the other side here, because one of the other things about camp that's always interesting to me is that I remember, for instance, like Olivier Vernon had this incredible camp a few years ago. But he was matched up with Jonathan Martin most of the time. And we didn't know, as we're evaluating it, like, okay, is it that Olivier Vernon has gotten this much better, or is it that Jonathan Martin's just not any good? And I feel like that happens in camp. And it turned out, actually, that both were true, that Jonathan Martin wasn't any good, but also Olivier Vernon got better. And I feel like that happens here with position groups, with the DBs and the wide receivers, too, where a lot of times we've kind of fallen for wide receivers in training camp, and it's because they were working against garbage DBs, and then they'd work against a Surtain or Madison, and we would see what they were really about. So I guess so far from what you've seen in camp, because it is the one thing you can evaluate a little bit when they're not hitting as much, who's gotten the better of it? Has it been the receiver group, or has it been the DB group?
I'm sorry, I was texting my wife. How much longer does this go, man?
Depends when the wind passes. We'll start with Schad on this one then.
Okay.
Who's gotten the better of it, the receiver group or the DB group?
I think the receivers have outperformed the corners overall, except for Xavier Howard versus Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker has not been able to get off against Xavier Howard. The problem for the Dolphins is that their number 2 corner is an issue. It's probably the most glaring issue on the team. Cordray Tankersley has not taken a giant step forward in his second year. Tony Lippett has not yet rebounded from an Achilles injury and probably won't until halfway through the season. And in today's Palm Beach Post, if you go online, you'll read a story about Torrey McTyer, who has risen to compete for the starting position, even though he was the 10th cornerback on the depth chart at this time last year, which is a fun story, but you don't want fun stories. You want to win.
All right, so let's get to the DBs specifically here. And you mentioned McTyer, and when you see a guy emerge in camp, sometimes it's because the guys he's competing against were not that good to begin with. So that's been a pattern too in Dolphins camps. Want to move to that other corner though, specifically. If Xavier Howard is going to be a number 1 corner, is Tankersley a legitimate number 2? Is Tony Lippett coming back from an injury a legitimate number 2? And are they going to use McCain, who they decided to reward this offseason? I think correctly so, because he's been one of their better players the past couple of years. Is he going to have a different role this year than he had last year?
I think the Dolphins paid McCain to be a slot corner. I don't think they paid him to move to the outside. I mean, in a pinch, he and/or Minkah Fitzpatrick could play outside corner, but who knows? Maybe there's some veteran that gets cut at the very end before the preseason is over that the Dolphins sign. I think, they have a little money to spend. That would actually be the best place to spend it, on a veteran corner. They tried Alteron Werner a year ago. Didn't really work out, but that type of player, a guy who's had some success in the NFL, who, can bring a little veteran presence to that defensive backs room, I think would be helpful.
I checked out like 20 minutes ago, man.
No, we could tell with some of the commentary here.
I cutlered this one like halfway through.
That's right. But you're all in. You're all in. Make sure to read Jason Leisure in the Palm Beach Post on the day he cares. But Schad, let's get back to you then here. On the safeties, Minkah obviously been given a lot of responsibility from the very beginning. What's the fit between him and Rashad Jones? And, have you seen any interaction between them? Has Jones because when you look at the Dolphins roster right now, other than Wake, Jones is the veteran guy there who's actually credentialed and established. So how do you think that interplay is going to work?
I mean, Rashad Jones is kind of a lead-by-example guy. I don't think he's the type to necessarily grab Minkah Fitzpatrick on the field and show him how it's done. I've actually seen, Walt Aikens out there, the special teams leader, and then backup defensive back, sort of doing more of that. TJ McDonald's actually had a pretty nice camp. He's sort of rebounded, I think, knowing that he's going to be on the field at the start of the season instead of suspended as he was last year has had a positive impact for him. The Dolphins were so concerned about the meshing between Schad Jones and TJ McDonald last year. We'll have to see how it plays out in the preseason. I mean, that's the combination we've seen on the field most often. So, I mean, the Dolphins are hoping Fitzpatrick has a big impact on this year, but how they utilize him is going to be really interesting to watch. I mean, they're planning on using him all over the field, and I think he's smart enough to be able to do that. But I don't know. Think yourself to make sure that they find a way to get players on the field on defense who can actually make a greater impact. Because last year there weren't enough sacks, there weren't enough interceptions, there weren't enough turnovers forced, and they think Fitzpatrick can at least bring some more of that.
Yeah, and that for me is sort of the biggest conundrum facing Matt Burke is, I would say clearly if you're trying to field a team with three of the best 11 defensive the best 11 defensive players, all three of those guys have to be on the field. So I do think it might have to require a scheme change, more 4-2-5 looks, or one of those safeties playing more like a linebacker. But I do think that is the more prudent way for the Dolphins to go forward defensively.
You hit on it there, Chris, with the fact that one of them might play more like a linebacker. That'd probably be TJ McDonald. They've been saying since spring, we're not going to move TJ McDonald to linebacker, but when they play three safeties, we kind of are. So that's probably how that'll play out, I think.
And that's sort of one of those things too that we were talking about earlier. Like when they say that Albert Wilson's not a slot receiver, like it's possible that Adam Gase was just lying. Like it's possible that they will use him as a slot receiver, and they, NFL coaches like to be secretive. Like I don't think we necessarily have to take these guys at their word.
Oh, I think on that one in particular, he's legitimately irritated, and it's because everyone else doesn't realize that. I think what Adam Gase did in that one is his phrasing was a little off, and Schad pointed this out to me, and when I was listening to it through this lens, it made more sense to me that Albert Wilson has been a slot receiver, but that he's not going to really be a slot receiver here.
Yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. And as the season evolves, there'll be injuries and there'll be guys who are forced to play at certain positions anyway. All right, before we wrap here, guys, it doesn't sound like either of you think that DB is a plus position for the Dolphins. I know there's a little bit of disparity here about wide receiver. If I was to say one group on the team, whether it's the quarterbacks, the offensive line, the running backs, receivers, defensive line, linebackers, DBs, what group on this team do you think is going to be above average?
I think defensive end is the best position on the team. I think Andre Branch, who's the second highest paid defensive player or the second highest paid player, something ridiculous like that on the team, is listed as third string on the depth chart at defensive end that came out for the first preseason game. That tells you just how much talent they have at the defensive end position. The Dolphins believe they're going to get a lot more pass rush this season. You lose Sue, but you add Robert Quinn. They think that's a net plus overall. I think it's a little bit underplayed how good Robert Quinn can be. So I think defensive line will be solid. I think defensive end should be very good.
Chris, Ethan, we have swirling winds now and helicopters coming in overhead. There is no really strong position on the team. It's probably a 4-win roster.
Okay, I think that's the way to end it. Jason Leisure predicting that the Dolphins will go 4-12. All right, you can read them in the Palm Beach Post. They're all in this season. They're traveling. They've got some big-time sponsor they won't tell us about. We always support the work up at the Palm Beach Post. I was there twice. I know Shad's on his second go-round there, so you can check him out at Jason Leisure. That's Jason, Lieser, and at Schad Joe on Twitter. Check out their 67 blogs. Every day, all of them Leisure telling you how terrible the team is and how much they're lying to you. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, and we'll check out your next 5 reasons why, Schad, on your blog.
Oh, thanks just for having us, man. We're so blessed and fortunate to be on the 5 Reasons Why podcast, the biggest media outlet in South Florida. People probably don't even know about the Palm Beach Post. Thank you, Ethan, for telling people that it exists.
It's good.
You are doing a service to the people and to us. Thank you. Schad, was it good for you? What do you think, man?
Yeah. This is the best hour I spent since Very Cavallari.